This is a journey into sound. A journey which along the way will bring to you new color, new dimension, new values, and a new experience.
Welcome to the G-Spot Podcast. I'm your guide, Katie Silcox, bringing you your weekly self-love soundbite. Join us for conversations around sex, spirit, and all things self-care. All things self-care. All things self-care.
This is a journey into sound.
Uno, dos, tres, cuatro.
You are a G-Spot Podcast with Katie Silcox.
Hi everybody, it's Amaury, Program Director here at Shakti School. This is a special bootleg edition of the G-Spot. It's an Instagram live we recorded with Nidhi Pandya, and I hope you listen all the way through because it's so good. The audio echoes a few times, and there's some birds singing in the background, but it's totally worth it. It's really poignant for our times. Nidhi is a third-generation Ayurvedic healer. She was raised in Mumbai by her grandfather, who was an Ayurvedic healer, and started studying some of the Ayurvedic texts at a young age, and has continued to study Ayurveda formally from the ancient text of the Shloka Samhita and the Ashtanga Hridayam. So Nidhi teaches in our Level 2 Ayurveda certification on treatment protocols, cleansing, and children's health. And soon we're going to be announcing a guided study that Nidhi is leading at Shakti School on the Ashtanga Hridayam this fall. The Ashtanga Hridayam is the most relevant ancient text of Ayurveda for the modern practitioner, so make sure to get on our mailing list for details on that coming up. Also on the horizon, if you're interested in joining us in 2021 for our year-long Ayurveda certification that Nidhi and many other teachers teach in, that starts in January. So mark your calendars because early bird pricing for that program ends September 5th. Pencil that in, September 5th. And if you have any questions, you can book a call with me to talk about it. I'll put the link to my calendar and the program page in the show notes for you. And now here's your show.
Hey, Katie.
Hey guys!
How's it going, Katie? I'm super excited to be speaking to you. You know, you have given such great insight to the Western world. You've taken them on this whole journey of Ayurveda. So I'm a big fan of Katie's work. And to introduce Katie to all of those of you who are new to her, Katie is the founder of the Shakti School, which is like a women-centric Ayurveda school. I actually teach at the Shakti School, and I thoroughly enjoy teaching at the Shakti School because I feel like everybody, all the students out there as well, have this, like I was telling Katie earlier, it's power without aggression, you know. It's really bringing that Shakti energy into the world. And there are people from all over the world who are participating in the Shakti School courses, the practitioner level, advanced levels, and I love working with Katie and her team. So I'm so excited to bring you on here, Katie. You wanted to talk a little bit about mental digestion, Katie. So before we do that, can you tell us a little bit about your journey, right? Because it's so inspiring for everybody in the West that you've really gone on this path and you've gone this deep on the path. I'm going to turn the comments off for now so they can see your pretty face. Okay.
Well, first I want to say what an honor it is for me to be here with you. And when you ask me about my journey, what I'll say is that I was like many a typical woman in the West, really just feeling like kind of like shit, to be honest. And knowing that there was something about the way that my mind and my body were working that felt really off. And I found yoga, and yoga helped me relax, and it made me aware of my body. And I loved and fell in love with yoga, but then I realized that asana and even breath work wasn't enough to heal. And that's when I started to research Ayurveda, and I ended up moving to India for 6 months and studied with Agni and Indra Mohan in Chennai in India and various other teachers in India, and really just saw honestly how peaceful they were, how balanced they were. They were flexible and strong at the age of 50, 60, 70. And I thought, my goodness, these Indians really know something about health, and they've been doing it for 5,000 years. And so I just thought about my country. You know, the United States has the highest levels of obesity, mental illness, many issues in the whole world. And so I just became passionate about really trying to honor Ayurveda in the sense of a beautiful cultural gift that India gives to the world, but at the same time, as the Charaka Samhita asks us to do, making it accessible for the time and the place and the people in which it's being presented. And so I really see myself as a translator of ancient Ayurveda for the modern community that I live in. And it's an ongoing, I am very much a student as well as a teacher always.
You always are, aren't
We
you?
always are.
But that is such a gift, Katie, and I can sense the passion in your voice and your work. That is such a gift to bring and to give it to the world. I feel like it's even deeper and goes bigger than inculcating Ayurveda in our own lives. So America is grateful to have you.
Well, we're in an interesting time in our country right now as the whole world starts to wake up to, when you said, let's talk about Agni, I was so excited because not only are we talking about it in Shakti school, but this concept of Agni and its sister concept, which we can talk about, which is Ama, are so pertinent to the time we find ourselves in now. So I'm happy to talk about it.
I'm going to let you take the lead and start that one.
Well, I think what first our listeners can kind of, what is Agni for those of you that are just tuning in? Maybe you know Ayurveda, maybe you're brand new, but Agni is the second word in the Rig Veda, which is the oldest human spiritual text on the planet. The first word is Om, which maybe isn't even a word, right? So we can say Agni is the first word of the most ancient written spiritual text on the planet. So our foremothers and fathers from India are teaching us something. In order to develop ourselves spiritually and evolve ourselves spiritually, the most important word is Agni, which means fire. And so that to me just says everything. What is it about fire? We can see it in the Christian tradition, the Buddhist tradition, the Jewish tradition. Every temple you walk into has flame, has a candle, has a menorah, has a homa, a fire pit. So there's something so central to our humanity about this concept of the flame. So what is this Agni? It is the god of fire, right? But on a spiritual level, this is our capacity to transform ourselves. As one of my teachers said, to throw who we have been in the past with all of our past karmas, all of our past emotions, our lineage traumas, our experiences that have gone undigested from not only ourselves, Nidhi, but all of our foremothers and forefathers' pain and suffering, as well as their gifts, to throw all of that into the fire of who we could become. And so it speaks to the quintessential aspect of human evolution. Human evolution, we could argue, really began when we began to cook our food.
Absolutely.
When we began to sit by a fire and talk. Mm-hmm. So this is this huge concept. And the sister side to this, in the human body, this of course is your metabolic capacity of every cell. Every cell has this fire, this ability to digest. And also, this is our digestion on the physical realm, but as you and I were speaking about it, this is also our digestion on the mental, emotional, and intellectual realm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so there's this concept in Ayurveda of hungry ghosts. Mm-hmm. And what it's saying is, if we only come at it from the aspect of our mind, mm-hmm. you and I think, and many of our listeners were raised in cultures, modern cultures, where we are encouraged to gather more and more and more and more information. Mm-hmm. But Ayurveda says information, it's a hungry ghost. You just keep eating, but you never get full. Absolutely. And that's like me when I eat potato chips on the couch and I'm just eating them, right? And I'm never really satisfied. If I would just eat a sweet potato with some ghee, that nourishment on the mental emotional realm, the nourishment is experiential. It is what happens through the gateway of our somatic, our body. Mm-hmm. So you and I can, with all of our hearts, learn Ayurveda, learn all the rules. We can learn how to, for example, now I'm reading, and many of us are reading books about anti-racism. We can do all of this work to have our intellect stimulated. And yet, if we don't process our feelings and somatic experiences around it, the nutrition never gets to the deeper layers of our tissues and cells. And that's actually my concern right now on the planet, that we are learning through Instagram and Facebook. We're learning, thinking. I'm reading. And yet, how much is actually getting in and melting us and enabling us to really, the teachings say, be like ghee near a fire. As if you take the ghee away from the fire, it becomes hardened. And if you bring the ghee close to the fire, it becomes melted. And in this spiritual sense, we can all take this right now, and I need it more than anyone. That's why I study this with so much passion, because I'm a firecracker and I'm very reactive. I have to really But if we let ourselves be ghee near the fire, what is the fire? The fire is love, loving awareness. And so that really is the heart of Agni. Agni, on the highest of levels, is love. Not like, oh, love and light, let's all just be one. No, let me sit with you, Nidhi. Let me sit with the next person that I meet. Let me sit with everyone that comes through my path as if she had been my beloved child, and witness her through the eyes of love. For me, it's easy to do that with the outside world. I can do that for you all day long. But I think for many of us that are attracted to spirituality, the one we need to do it on first is ourselves.
That's super. That was so beautifully explained, Katie. I loved that introduction to Agni. I think it was probably one of the best introductions I'd ever heard, right? Because instantly we think about Agni in our physical digestive system. And you know what, the couple of things that came to my mind when you said this, right, is when you have that Agni burning with the heat, with the fuel, right, you can sustain that fire. It's not a volatile fire. It's a fire that can be sustained. So even in our minds, right, to have that kind of softness while we are transforming, while we are processing, allows us to go so much deeper and allows us to go so much longer. And it was such a great insight that you said, right? Intellectually, we're consuming, right? But that's level one of digestion. When we transform something that we hear, we are just kind of using it, transforming it through the Agni of our senses. It's just, oh, I've heard words and I understand what they mean. But that's secondary digestion, right? Which is inside you, which happens between your intellect and your mind and your soul. Those deeper levels of digestion, the Agni that comes up there processing anything we consume at that level, right, is really what internalizes it, right? All of the Vedas, right, Katie, they were not written, the Vedas were not written because people did research in the outside world. The digestion process was completely different. Today, the way we kind of conduct research is we take something from the outside world, we research it, we digest it through our senses, and we write a research report. But the way the Vedas were written was just literally that internal, awakening the fire within you that connects, that has the natural ability to connect to the world outside you. And you know, Katie, right, like I'm sure you see this too, that we all actually possess that internal fire. We all actually carry it with us. I always say in my courses and my lives that we don't have to go seeking for the answers. We just have to ask the questions, right? But we're always consuming data, consuming this new superfood, consuming that. The world lives inside us. Everything we need lives inside us. And understanding that fire on that external level, that it's like fire to cook our food and then the fire to digest our food. Similarly, fire to consume information and fire to process information.
Oh, you're giving me such a teaching this morning. I feel my heart opening. I feel a connection to you and your lineage and me and my lineage meeting heart to heart. And
no, I feel the same.
And you know what else I think about this consuming and looking to the outside world for information? I was speaking with Indu Aurora, who's one of our other teachers, about just where we are in this world right now. And she said, we're all looking for the experts and the educators on the outside. And that's a good thing. We need to listen to one another, and we need information from one another and perspective from one another. But none of that means anything if we can't tap in to that inner resource of knowing, that buddhi, that highest aspect of our mind that can say, I would like to eat this. It is healthy for me. And no, that actually I will not be eating. And to be able to make the distinction. Another definition I want to bring in that I think you'll find interesting, and maybe someone else will as well, is this definition of Agni as our hunger, the feeling of being hungry. And so on a physical level, and on a mental level, we're never not hungry mentally because of all the information, food we have. Physically, most of us watching this are privileged. We never are without food.
Mm-hmm.
We never know what it feels like to be hungry. And yet in the realm of spirit, so many of us are starving, right? We're so hungry. But to really feel that longing for more is so important. And I think this has just been huge for my life. Like, how often during my day do I know what Agni even feels like? Like, how many times are we like actually like, oh, I'm feeling the rumble in my belly? And for me, it's like not that often because maybe I overeat a little bit too much. It's the same thing on the mental, emotional level. And when you do that, as you know, Nidhi, but your listeners may not, you form this other thing called ama, which is psycho-emotional / physical toxins. And it starts to build up. And what's so tricky about ama is that blocks the gateways of our perception. Not only the gateways of the five senses, but also our perception of other people, of interactions, of politics. It's blocking our true vision. And so maybe I'm curious your take on Ama and Agni as that intimate relationship.
Absolutely, right? So I'm going to talk about it at a physical level first for our listeners, Katie.
Please.
Right? So at a physical level, right? So you have your flame, you have your Agni. And when you consume food, and if you're consuming either excess food or you're consuming too often, and when your Agni cannot metabolize that food, what's going to happen? There's going to be a residue, like an uncooked residue. And that uncooked residue is now going to become slime and grime in your system. It's going to crawl through your channels, and it's going to leave you feeling heavy. And this is at a physical level. But the same thing happens at an emotional level. When we go through experiences in life, right? When we go through experiences, when we go through information, when we go through watching news, and we're not able to process it, digest it, take what's nutritive, eliminate what's waste, we hold toxic patterns and stories, that residue that lives in our nervous system. At a physical level, right, Katie, you know that at a physical level, when you have ama, you start responding, becoming sensitive to foods. Suddenly your system is just like, is this poison? Is this poison? Everything, whether it's dairy, it's tomatoes, it's gluten, your system, your Agni fails. When we have that toxic residue in our mind, which kind of gets built up, of course, I'm going to say that again, gets built up because of excess consumption of information, which you may not be able to process, which happens as stories in our childhood, experiences we go through, and that are not fully metabolized, even trauma. And then just how you start being triggered by foods so quickly, you start getting triggered by events around you.
Exactly.
This whole increase in anxiety, in fear, in reactivity, all of that, right? Because now your system, your mental Agni, your ability to process in your nervous system has declined, and everything seems exaggerated. Right? Like, Katie, I am shocked, right? On one hand, there was so much care and caution with the coronavirus, right? To a point where, right, I think reasonable caution is important. And of course, I've seen some people who've been careless, and I've also seen people who've been overly cautious, right? There's a disconnect in the rationale. I mean, I've seen irrational behavior as well. And then suddenly there are protests because there's something that triggers you more than this did. Right? So we're constantly being triggered. Now the journey that we need to make is that the trigger is outside. How do I process this inside?
Yeah.
Just as I understand that tomatoes, for example, tomatoes make me feel like this. And we will do this, we'll write elimination diaries for our food. We need to do the same for our experiences in the outside world.
Yeah. It's such a delicate balance, right? Because on one hand, one of my spiritual teachers was speaking with me the other day, and she said, collectively, we are being asked to digest the ama of our past, particularly here in the United States, 401 years of horrific treatment and oppression of our Black beloved brothers and sisters on this planet, right? And so all of us are, the ama is like, it's like we're doing a panchakarma and the ama's coming up and we're going, oh my God, what do we do with this ama? What do we do with this ama? And in some way, you can't run from your ama, right? It's the gods and goddesses of the planets or whatever you believe in, right, have said, this is the time when you will be presented with collective ama. And now, we have a choice right now. We can either digest it and metabolize it and process it and become better and more evolutionary humans, or we can get re-triggered and we can do what we call in somatic experiencing, which is the type of therapy that I work with, repetition compulsion. The samskaras on the samsara, that wheel of repetition, gets deeper the grooves. And so that's what I want to caution myself, everyone listening. Right now, so many people are being asked to be with this trauma, this ancient and recent, right, collective ama. And guess where the best place to do that processing is? With a spiritual teacher, with a therapist, with a close friend or family, or by yourself, but like with so much love and presence on the body. Trauma and collective ama cannot be processed intellectually and not on Instagram. I'm not saying that we shouldn't speak, because we need to, while at the same time making the technologies, for example, panchakarma would be a physical technology. What are the more subtle technologies for processing ama, trauma, they rhyme, on a collective, on an individual and collective level? There's a great book from the Black somatic experiencing therapist, Resma, who wrote a book called My Grandmother's Hands. And he speaks about the way that this collective ama can't be processed intellectually, can't be processed on Instagram. It must be done through the body. And Ayurveda knew this 5,000 years ago.
Amazingly well. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, that's such a great point, right? And we know the tendency of ama, right, Katie? Even at the physical level, ama is so sticky that it invites more ama. Yeah. The natural process is that ama invites more ama. It has a magnetic charge. But like you said, our job now is to lose that charge from the ama. And the minute we lose that charge from the ama, it allows that ama to dissipate and to be expelled from our systems. And this age-old trauma, we've just been, like you said, we've just building and building and building on this. And it is really time now. We actually have the time, even in our own spaces. We are not watching something on news and running to work and it's not background noise anymore. It's in our faces.
Yeah.
Right? There is a condition in Ayurveda which is called Bahu dosha, where your whole body is full of doshas.
Wait, what's it called?
Bahu, a lot of doshas, right?
Bahu dosha.
Yeah. So when you have Bahu dosha, ama avastha, you have no choice then but to let it expel out of your system. Otherwise, it's going to explode, right? If you either die or you cleanse, right?
Wow.
And we're kind of at that point today, Katie. We either die or we cleanse. And while this is happening universally, right? As there are things to be cleaned on the outside world, but you know what? Guess what? Anytime there is something to be cleaned on the outside world, it actually begins with the cleansing in the inside.
Yeah.
And I think,
Well, I was just going to say, this is what I've been really thinking about these last few weeks. What Tantra teaches us is that when you're seeing like you're holding two things that feel like paradoxes or opposites, you're getting close to God. You're getting close to the truth, And so in one hand, we want to hold all of the voices, the traumas, the pain, and that deep need for justice, for protest, maybe even riots. Like the Ama needs to come out, right? We want to hold that and honor that and not judge it. Even the rage, the Kali, like the fiercest of the worst. And in the other hand, all of us must hold that remembrance that we are all one human people, that we are at the core of the kosha, right? Through these layers of who we are, beyond the traumatic and beyond the generational and beyond our lineages and our races and our colors and our sex. We are, the teachings call Amani, a jewel. That's all of us, right? And to be remembering, okay, my brothers and sisters, there is no other. At the end of the day, we are all this one special, precious jewel. And can we hold that remembrance and hold that love and compassion for one another and see one another as brothers and sisters on this earth walk? And at the same time, differentiate and say, and some of us have had a lot more privilege than others. And we live in an oppressive society that has held white people as the standard. Like, we have to wake up to those things. And that requires differentiation. But if we only differentiate and we don't remember our unity, we will be lame in the sense, like, we won't be fully evolving. And that's really what I'm trying to do. And it's hard, right? Sometimes. I think you and I both are passionate about self-care while doing that hard work of being a human being, processing our individual and collective karma. And I know that for me, it's so easy. You know, I got into Ayurveda and I wrote a whole book. I'll promote it. It's called Healthy, Happy, Sexy.
Ayurveda. You should, absolutely.
We'll let people know. But I wrote that book because I have it over here. I have to read it all the time. And it sometimes is a little bit embarrassing because I'm like, oh my God, like, I'm not doing everything in here.
We're our own teachers. We are our own teachers. So.
And we write the book we most need. But what I want to say to everyone listening is, look, I'm a best-selling Ayurveda author. So many nights I like reach for a little bit too much food or self-soothing, you know, like, and that's okay. All of us might need a little bit of soothing at this time. And so to really get out of that frame of perfectionism that sometimes Ayurveda can really push us into that perfectionism. I'm sure you know that game.
Yes, and I think people do that a little bit more than Ayurveda itself does, because to me, when you, like, right, Katie, when we connect Ayurveda and we connect yoga and we connect the spiritual aspect of it, acceptance is just as important.
You're right. There's a distinction between actually Ayurveda and the way we can interpret it with our minds.
Absolutely. So, you know, like when I work with people as well, Katie, I tell them, I said, pick your indulgences. I don't want you to live life as a robot. You want to pick your indulgences. And of course, know what you're doing for health, know what you're doing for soothing, know what you're doing for anything else. Yeah. I just want to speak to the points that you said earlier, right? That when we're experiencing this great level of trauma in the world, and we need to kind of process it and cleanse it. And, you know, even when we do a panchakarma, right, like a full panchakarma, there is so much tendency for the panchakarma to go wrong. So I feel like in this time, right, so panchakarma, there's a set of rules, do's, don'ts, who's eligible, who's not eligible. But the whole thing is to create grounding. And while we are in this journey, right, where we're trying this journey to undo these distorted energies in the world, to kind of heal ourselves and heal others, it's extremely important to keep ourselves grounded, loving. We can only make a change. I know I keep coming back to this, but I so believe that we can make a change in the world outside by making it within. You know, these events are going to raise strong emotions in us. And it's always important to find that counter emotion, which we can tap into within ourselves to keep us level. Because what's going to happen otherwise, right? We're going to solve one problem on the outside and create a new one inside. And that's what basically happens when panchakarma at a physical level goes wrong. You heal one problem, but if the panchakarma is done wrongly, you create another. You create an imbalance somewhere else, right? So that real balance, that real addressing the issues of the outside world begins from inside. And, you know, Katie, I truly believe that when we heal ourselves, right, just our journey of compassion. I always say Buddha, right? Buddha changed the world, but never, all he did was he went to the jungle and changed himself. He went alone, no belongings, no, by his own realizations, right? When we come to that place of great compassion, the words that come out of our mouth, then our whole being is so contagious, right? It's so radiant that it crawls and it changes the world. So while we are going to do what we do on the outside, like you said, and while you are going to consume some media related to these events, it's constantly important to process it and say, what can I change? What can I do within me, outside of me in my actions,
Exactly.
which is going to continue to stay balanced and create more causes for peace rather than lack of it.
Yeah, 100%. Your voice and words make me think about tapas and Agni and Tejas and the way that tapas is like this concerted effort to do your daily routine, to do things that are good for you when it would be easier to watch Netflix and eat donuts, and that by having a little bit of austerity, discipline, which is where the word disciple comes from, those austerities that Ayurveda and yoga ask us to do, create tapas, which means warmth and glow and radiance. And the teachings say that tapas and that tejas creates a warmth of personality that has the power to draw in and melt other people's hearts.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Like, that's what we all want, right?
Yeah,
like at the end of the day. And so like we're being called right now on the planet to be good disciples, disciples of the outer work, whether you're an activist or a protester or a writer, or like I have a platform that I intend to use on the outside, but also the inner work of how can my teacher says, Katie, stay strong, firm, hard inner body, super soft outer body. Like nobody's gonna mess with me on the inside, but on the outside I can be in love and not fake love, real deal love.
Right. Wow, that's actually very powerful, to keep that grit, that strength within us, and yet not allow that to harden us on the outside.
Right.
And this is how the 5 elements of Ayurveda come together, and the constant assessment of my fire, of water, of what I can do. Guys, Ayurveda is such an amazing science, even like so much at the mental level as well, which I think completely gets missed. But to understand that how the elements are playing games in your mind is too much wind causing anxiety. Are you holding on to things? It allows you to look at yourself and provide solutions to whatever it is that you need to balance. And with tapas, right? So Katie, I come from a family where there was a lot of fasting as children. And even as children, we had to fast. And honestly, I was just like, I need my food. I was very, I always was the one, I said I need my food. But the whole family was fasting, 15 people. So then you kind of feel embarrassed to not fast. And, now I understand the whole concept so much better, because, right, at a physical level, when you have ama at a physical level, right, which means you have toxic residue. And when you fast, what you're doing is you're bringing up your flame. It's like self-cleaning oven. You're putting your oven in the self-cleaning mode. That when your Agni comes up for food and it doesn't find any food, it then goes and cleans up the ama. And as a result, right, Katie, that you're left feeling so light and fresh, and that glow that you just talked about comes up, and then you're just you become this radiant person. I think even in the mind, right, we have all of this ama, toxic. I had an epiphany right now hearing you, right, that what is actually required sometimes, right, just as you stop giving yourself food at a physical level so you can process, sometimes when we're going through that conditioning of ama in our mind, the concept of an ashram or a monastery, the concept of disconnect. Sometimes we think we need to look for answers outside and just be like, somebody help me out. But sometimes all it requires is a disconnect. Is I'm not going to consume anything more. There's a big, there's a lot of virtue in a silent fasting as well, going into our silence. And part of that is to refrain from any new consumption through your senses. So you can really process what's sitting behind. Katie, I'm not sure, you know what Vipassana meditation is, right?
I've done them.
Okay, yeah, right. So I remember, so the first time I went to Vipassana, I was dragged, right? My father was like, you have to go. I was 15. I did a 10-day course. And I was just like, this, like, not looking at anybody, not talking to anybody, so I felt that it was intense. But I feel like that at the age of 15, changed my life forever.
Yeah.
Because for the first time, I was able to process everything that I had distracted myself with. So I had just distracted myself to avoid facing so many stories, so much armor that I was holding in my mind. And we all do. And sometimes our way of distraction is, right, like how we distract ourselves with food when we don't want to feel a feeling. Similarly, we distract ourselves by talking to others, by doing things outside in the world, when we really need to do is address the trauma inside. So even Katie, like when somebody dies, right, in the whole Ayurvedic Hindu philosophy, when you have a death in your family, right, now our instant tendency, even mine, is to make the person feel better. Oh my God, like, oh, you feel better if you've lost a loved one. But it's extremely important in the tradition to actually grieve, to process the death. There's 13 days of mourning, right? And it doesn't mean that you're inflicting pain upon yourself. You're exploring what comes up, the deeper levels. Every day, you sit on the ground to ground. You do mantra chanting to ground. And every day as layers related to memories of that person, the void that's created. Every day you peel off layers and layers, and then you can refill it with mantras, with grounding, with a sense of rhythm in your nervous system. Unless somebody has truly been mourned, you cannot move on. And similarly with everything that's happening in the world, right? Unless we truly understand it and process it and really see what it means for us, it's hard to move on.
Yeah. Beautiful. I would love to know everything that you do. Maybe this is another talk we can do, but what are the rites and rituals of that morning? Because we've completely lost our rituals, many of us in the West. I come from the lineage of the witches, and my people were burned, and our libraries of, in India, you guys still have your texts. And even though the British came and tried to, in many ways, destroy Ayurveda was not destroyed. It's still so alive, and you have so many of your texts. But unfortunately, in my lineage, many of our texts were burned. And so I just want to say, on behalf of my lineage, if I may be so bold, thank you for letting me be a part of your lineage. I am so grateful. And there's an emotion that arises in me to feel that gratitude for you and your lineage. But what I was going to say about that is, we've lost our rites and rituals. And when you take that away from someone, you take away their mental and emotional sanity. And so it makes perfect sense that white people went crazy on this planet. We lost all of our rites and rituals and connection to Mother Nature. Completely lost. And I'm not saying poor me, but in a way, if everyone understood that, there would be so much more compassion one to another. The other thing that I want to say, so I would love to learn those rituals from you with respect and do them. And I think about where we are in our culture in the United States and what you're saying about this need for silence in a time where everyone's speaking up more, and there's a goodness in speaking up more. And I think about, what would that look like? Because for you and I, we have such privilege to be able to go do a vipassana or do even meditation in our houses. And I want to ask you your thoughts, and I'll be thinking of this too. What about the people that live in abusive family situations where they can't even meditate, or they're living in neighborhoods where they go month to month on being able to afford food and clothing, like these places in our country that don't have access to this? This really is something that I'm thinking about and passionate about. What can we do in addition to us doing our meditations to support other people to be able to have that processing of the ama in a socio-cultural and even familial setting where we just don't have that privilege? You know what I mean?
I know what you mean. It's so sad, right? It's like, it is our responsibility, right? When we talk about balance in the world, and Ayurveda is all about balance. Balance is the definition of health in Ayurveda. Homeostasis we recognize in the West, and yet we have so much inequality in terms of what we're able to do. And like you said, right, we are different, but we're all one, right? There has to be this balance, this flow. It is such a deep responsibility for those of us who have access to any kind of resources, right? It could be emotional resources, it could be dealing with trauma, it could be, financial resources. But in terms of bringing us all in a place, at the end, what we don't realize is when one person suffers, we all suffer.
Yeah.
Right. And we're seeing that with the protests today, right? I mean, that is the world. Suffering is contagious. It's not going to evade you. We may think that we can hide within the confinements of our home and, live our fancy glam lives. But the truth is that the world doesn't work like that. When the suffering, it comes up very small. One person suffers, then 3 people suffer. That's multiplied into 9. It's multiplied exponentially, right? Because any person who's suffering inside is going to, it's going to become contagious to the people he interacts with. When it becomes so huge, it bursts, and the world comes to this Kali Yuga, this place of wake up now, that we've basically come to. So yeah, I'm with you, in whichever different ways that we can support.
How can we support it externally and internally? I wanted to add one thing to what you're saying. It's a fun word that even if you're a multi-billionaire on your yacht in the middle of the ocean and you think coronavirus and the emotions and suffering of people on the planet don't affect you, there's something called the morphogenic field, which in Ayurveda, I think it's the akasha, right? You have this etheric field through which all of our thoughts and emotions are traveling at the speed of light. So we're literally, I just want to remind all the listeners as well, the fear, the anger, the suffering, you think it's yours. Some of it's yours. A lot of it's just the field that we're swimming in. And so samba, like steadiness, like you said, like to be able to have your own steadiness in the crazy storm that's occurring is like the most important thing in the world for me, to be able to be a beacon and a light for other people. That stability is really important. And maybe that brings us to like some of the more practical things. Like I want to know what you recommend to people, Nidhi, in terms of, okay, like because most people on the planet have low Agni or variable Agni. Very few have really high Agni. And so how do we build Agni in a sustainable way?
You mean mentally to process these things?
Well, I'm more like physical. Like what is your physical Agni tips? I mean just the top ones, because there's so many.
At the digestive level, you mean?
Yeah, and then maybe we'll talk about the mental emotional after.
Okay, right. I think the first thing for anybody's digestive Agni, right? The first thing you want to do is eliminate toxins, right? So by the elimination of toxins, automatically your Agni becomes sharper, right? So elimination of toxins at a physical level, of course, means, and intermittent fasting. So fasting by itself, right, has a very spiritual connotation as well, because when you fast and that slime and grime gets digested, it also gets digested from your nerves. Ama, as it sprawls through your channels at a physical level, also coats your nervous system. When that is released, there is the ability of ether, that akasha, that ability to absorb, right? For things to move, the subtle energies, your prana to rise. All of that exists, and then your Agni becomes sharper. Not only are you processing, you're also processing in a way that's going to elevate you. Because there is a problem of somebody who can have very sharp Agni, and then you just burn everything. Then you're only reactive. Anybody who touches you gets burnt. Any food you eat is going to take you to the toilet, and the nutrients are not going to be absorbed. The difference is the fire burning on a matchstick, right, just burns out, and the fire burning with the fuel. So the first thing that I would say is digestion of your toxic waste, whether it's through intermittent fasting, whether it's through getting sunlight and air, whether it's through using sharp herbs that are going to do that. Secondly, on a physical level, right, you want to consume good fats and good spices. Because what does it take to build a good bonfire or a good flame? You need the fuel, you need the fire, you need the right amount of air, the right amount of wind. So to keep that balance in your food, when in doubt, all I say is make sure everything is warm and moist. Even everything we consume, right, for that matter, on a mental plane. Like the mother's hug is warm and moist. A good conversation is warm and moist, right? Anything that you consume is warm and moist. Assessing that even at a mental level, right? While we will deal with our trauma and remove all of that ama, also then engaging in, processing things in your mind, that what you're left with is warm and moist. Not all our experiences will be warm and moist. What's happening today doesn't feel warm and moist. Let's say, what can I do and on my end, on my level, to create that warmth and moisture, right? But the one simple advice that I give to everybody is for your food, when you feel, if you're feeling heavy and you feel your Agni is lower than what it should be, just take a break from food, sit with yourself, introduce warm and moist food, warm with spices and temperature, moist with a good fat and the basic nature. And that's the only place you need to start. You don't need to go crazy finding 100 remedies, finding 100 herbs. This is where you start, and you automatically see over the next few weeks the big difference that you begin to feel at a physical level as well as at a mental level. Also honoring the sun, right? Honoring the kalas, the time of the day, the circadian rhythm. Honoring that when the sun is outside, that's when the Agni inside is burning high as well. Taking advantage of that Agni. That's the time we do most of our work, is midday, like during the hours of 10 and 3 and 4, because as the Agni is higher outside, similarly your Agni is higher inside. But of course, none of this is possible. None of that can be done unless we have first digested whatever toxicity is sitting in our mind and in our bodies.
Beautiful. Another remedy I always give, and it's so hard to take, is just stopping at 3/4 full. Just not overfilling our belly. It's so simple, and it's often the most quickest way to increase Agni is just eat a little bit less than you normally would. Most of us are overfeeding our stomachs, and they stretch, and then like anything you stretch, it stays stretched. And then next time it needs more food to feel that hunger signal.
Yeah, we increase the elasticity. Exactly. And what I found very interesting, right, Katie, like when we were growing up, we were sitting cross-legged on the floor, right? By the natural position of sitting cross-legged on the floor, you are kind of sitting in a position where it's hard to overeat. If you ever sit on the floor cross-legged and you overeat, like I know as a child, when I wanted to do that, I've had to unbutton. I'd be like, oh my God, can I sit on the table? Like, can I just, because that's what it does. So it's it's a great way to be able to assess, like your body will naturally reject food sitting down cross-legged on the floor when you're trying to overeat.
So I'm asking for a friend about this, but so one of the things that my friend that I'm asking for does is I live by myself, and my guilty pleasure is I love to eat and watch like a Netflix. It's like so soothing. It feels like a mother's hug. And so I've thought about this for about 10 years, and I've gone back and forth, and I know that I shouldn't eat with media. Of course, that's rule number 1 in Ayurveda. But it also feels so pleasing. And so I'm curious about your thoughts on media and food, and maybe what would be a good in between. Sometimes you don't want to just sit in silence by yourself and eat.
Right. So, of course, right? So, of course, we know that the reason why watching media is not advised is because your nervous system actually takes orders with the intention. So when you have an intention, your nervous system takes orders. And now your nervous system is like, hey, I want to digest. I need to digest food. So let's get everything out. Let's put all our energies and all the resources come to the kitchen, which is your digestive system, right? So that's the order the nervous system is giving. Everybody come to the kitchen. And now suddenly that kitchen has been distracted. Your gut has been distracted and say, hey, you know what? We actually need a little bit of processing in our mind too, because we're watching something that's triggering emotions, right? Because the truth is every time you watch something, it triggers emotions.
No matter what, right.
And no matter what. We also know that certain emotions like fear or anger or that excitement, thrill when you're watching something may release cortisol, may decrease the enzymes that are present in the gut, right? Because now the energies are focused in dealing with fear as well as dealing with digestion, dealing with anxiety as well as dealing with digestion, right? However, right, I feel like if this is something that you absolutely want to keep, there is a way to train your brain before you sit. Firstly, only to consume things that are not triggering, right? And to really train your brain to start with a little meditation and say, this is predominantly my time to digest my food, and I'm going to just sit back and let a little bit of work happen in the mind because I want to watch something. I feel like as long as it's not very volatile, right, and there's still back of the head, there is an awareness of digestion. I feel like that is not a bad solution. And that's possible. You know, Katie, I always say the story of when I had children, it was like two people, right? Because I was pushing, but I didn't let out a single shriek because there was part of me that was kind of, you know, I had imagined myself, visualized that I was on this stream in Bhutan, in India, just relaxed and breathing. So part of me was still there, right? A part of me was still experiencing that, and part of me was still experiencing this. So there was a detachment from that process. So even when you're eating, right, when you've done this, I think enough, I feel practice that this food is going down and this is predominantly what my body is doing, and you're not watching anything to raise crazy emotions, I think it should be okay if that's something you really want to.
Well, you know, I think that that's one of the best explanations of why no media with food. And I think we need those. My Western intellectual brain needs those explanations almost scientifically to convince myself. And I think for me, there's just so much emotion wrapped into food that it's like I think that I will be enlightened when I can sit and be with my, you know, I think it's like such a huge part of my spiritual journey.
Wow.
And for so many women, our relationships
So
with
many
food,
women.
and I really am more inspired to just be with it right now and not use the media and keep them separate and to deal with the feelings of loneliness that arise. You know, that's really what it is. And I'm mentioning it because it's so predominant in our world. And at the same time, some nights or some days you're like you said, like, okay, I'm going to let myself have this pacifier like a baby and keep an awareness of the digestion. You know, I will share this on the mental emotional realm with Amma. You know, we have the Shakti School, and we also have a subscription program where we give people a meditation and a video every month. And one of the things that's been so helpful with my own journey in meditation is I did very masculine, what I call masculine forms of meditation on emptiness, on witness consciousness, Purusha. I did so much of that. But for the processing when we're dealing with deep-seated trauma or anxiety or PTSD, which is almost everyone right now, actually, Ayurveda says using the gateways of the five senses is food and orientation. It enables the animal body to feel safe and grounded. And so just as a follow-up on that mental emotional realm, what we're working with in Shakti School and in my subscription program is actually very different than only inner body meditation. It's very much sitting in nature and letting the gateways of the eyes be purified through beautiful sights, letting the gateways of the ears be purified through bird song and the sounds in the environment, and the same with all the senses. And I think that's what I call the goddess meditations, because it's very much the Shakti, right? Being with her, being with the earth, rather than trying to leave.
I am so glad you said that, Katie. I feel like it's my biggest battle, to kind of express that. You're so true, right? Because we hold emotions at such a dense, tangible level. These emotions become very dense. Trauma. And to use something that is so subtle and etheric, it's not going to pierce through that.
Exactly.
It's not. So like you said, we need growth to battle growth to begin with.
Yes, ma'am.
And all of those are monastic practices. When you have addressed, you can't. When you're on an extreme side, we're all dealing with such gross emotions. We can't go for that journey. You know.
And it can be disembodying and dissociative, which creates more trauma.
Oh my God, so much. Now you have some particles of energy that have released, but which have nowhere to go because they're all of these villains in your psyche sitting and waiting to catch them. And basically it becomes even more scary. And I know because I've firsthand witnessed it, right?
Oh, me too.
Versus all of these other types of grounding work. That's amazing. I'm so glad and you explained
Well,
it so
and
nicely.
I feel like you and I are like cosmic soul sisters, and we need to just do so many things. I mean, I know I want to let your people know, and we're going to let our people know very soon. Like, we're having you come in and do like a whole special deepening course and the deeper texts of Ayurveda. But one of the things I want to invite you as my guest into our subscription program, Nidhi, because I want to offer you these meditations, and also maybe you can come in and we can bring you and to Virginia to do some teaching as well in the subscription program, because everything I'm doing with my students, I call it Body Yantra. We are meditating only on the bones and the organs. That's what we do. We meditate on the actual bones, earth element, as well as the fascia, the organs, the water element, the rasa, the rakta. We do the dhatus meditation because that is the earth in a world where it's like Kali Yuga, we're like taking selfies. It's so etheric that all I'm doing with my girls and myself is orientation to nature as a meditation, and meditation on the bones and the muscles, and then all the other subtle things arise. The emotions arise, the trauma, the sensations, the images, the thoughts, those more subtle things can arise, but you have a structural anchor point, the structure Shakti needs to flow through. And I was with a tantric guru for 10 years doing subtle body practices, what I call masculine form, some of the more monastic type practices. And after 10 years of being the strongest student, my body broke down. And then I started learning about the nervous system and what some of these tantric yogic practices that were designed for men who lived in caves and in forests in India, who were doing aesthetic practices. That's who these practices were designed for. And wonderful, it makes sense for them at that time and where they were in the world. But for a woman in this era who has never even found her self-esteem, to be asked to have no self is not a good idea.
Oh my God, so true, so well said. Here you're trying to rise without any grounding.
Right.
It's like you're going to fall flat on your face when you go up and you have no grounding. That's so, oh my God, this like really needs to be saved and heard, because it is so true. And so many people who get on this path get misled. Unfortunately, Instagram is going to bump us off in 3 minutes.
Okay.
Katie, but listen, I have to tell you, like, it's crazy that you said that, because, just this morning, I actually recorded like a meditation on the 5 elements. I just recorded it this morning. I mean, I did it as a part of something else. But yeah, I so believe that. It's so true to kind of really meditate on our own body and what's within us. That's how Vedas were written. It was
Actual body.
Yeah, that's how.
And then you feel reality.
Exactly. The more you meditate on what's within you, the more you understand it, and the more you can uncover. And it's such a lovely journey. I'm loving it. And this was such a fabulous conversation.
Well, Nidhi, obviously this is the beginning of an ongoing conversation.
Yes,
we're going to be having online and off, and I just couldn't love you more.
I know, me too. I think this was very cathartic to me. I have a lot of things to think about. Thank you so much, Katie.
Thank you, Nidhi. So great to be with you.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Bye.
ফোটে ফুল আপন সুখে ফোটে ফুল